In this sacred moment of transfiguration, let us bow our heads and open our hearts to the profound mystery unfolding before us. Beloved, as we gaze upon the radiant light of this transfigured moment, may we be reminded that the divine spark resides within each of us, waiting to be unveiled. Just as the veil between the seen and the unseen is lifted, may our own veils of perception and understanding be removed, allowing us to receive and see the interconnectedness of all creation. In this transfigured light, we are called to recognize the divine in every face, in every creature, and in the beauty of the world around us. We are co-creators in this ongoing cosmic dance of creation, evolving toward the fullness of love. So, with hearts aglow and spirits uplifted, may we carry this transfigured light out into the world, refracting it with all we meet. May we, like Moses and Elijah, be bearers of wisdom and compassion. And may our lives reflect the love that transfigures all things. As we descend from the sacred mountain, let us do so with grace and purpose, knowing that we are forever changed by the encounter with the divine. May the blessings of transfiguration be upon us all, now and forevermore. Amen.
Well, good afternoon to all of you. Happy Super Bowl Sunday, happy Valentine's Day, happy Ash Wednesday, happy birthday to Patrick. So good to see you on the video screen, Pat. We love you. And hello to everyone out there in Zoom land. It just really hit me how happy and thankful I am that we have this technology where people maybe just on the other side of town, but people in different states, not people, our family, our friends, our loved ones, can join us up in Reno, Nevada, Lonnie and Joan, Ann's mom in Colorado. So good to see all of you. And Allen, Virginia, way up in Oceanside, may as well be in another state. No, we love you, and it's so good that you're with us here today. Well, we started out a little bit late. We got a delay of game penalty. And so now my timing is all thrown off, and I don't know what's going to happen with the clock. May have some clock management issues up here today. But I know if I'm going too long, you'll throw a yellow flag and give me the 2-minute warning, but hopefully at the end of the sermon, at the end of the game, you'll still dump Gatorade on my head. That was a joke. Tina, I'm being facetious. I'm being sarcastic. But she's ready to go. She's cracked the lid, and she's... let's pray. Father, Son, and Spirit, thank you for not just visiting us, but being in us and creating us for yourself. May we know who we are in you because we know you. In Jesus' name, amen. Have you ever had a mountaintop experience? I know we've been talking about having an epiphany, an aha moment, a sudden realization, a eureka, I understand it now. A mountaintop experience is like an epiphany on steroids. I mean, it is an epiphany upon an epiphany upon an epiphany. Most of our epiphanies, if not all of them, come by the grace and gift of God. But a mountaintop experience is a revelation from God, a visitation from God, a felt presence of Father, Son, and Spirit. Have you ever had a mountaintop experience? Maybe it wasn't on the mountaintop, because I'll put mountaintop experience in quotes. Because mountaintop experiences can happen in other places. You don't have to trudge up to K2, Kilimanjaro, or Mount Everest, or even Cowles Mountain to get a mountaintop experience. It could be at the beach. Maybe at a retreat in a quiet place. A mountaintop experience. And kind of explaining what a mountaintop experience is, or talking about a mountaintop experience, I went and found some quotes, and I kind of knew before I got into it that there would be a lot of quotes about the ascent up the mountain. And if it's not a mountain, if you start thinking figuratively and metaphorically, our life is a journey, and we have times when we go through rough patches, but we want to get to a high place, and we look at the mountain, we look at our obstacles, we look at our problems, and we know our journey is filled with ups and downs. And I knew looking for quotes, it would be talking about the ascent, the climb, the difficulty of it. But then when you get to the top, wah, there's the view at the top. But once you get to the top of a mountain, and whether or not you've had a mountaintop experience there, what comes next? You got to come back down. Oh, there it is. View at the top and then coming down. I thought, are there any quotes about coming back down? Let's look at a few quotes as we move along. I think I have 3 or 4. The summit is what drives us. Now, I got this from Walk My World, and it's climbers, mountain climbers, mountain trekkers. And so a lot of it is language about the ascent and the actual climbing a mountain. And for climbers, the summit is what drives us. But the climb itself is what matters. We can think about our life in that way as well. Conrad Anker said that. Next slide. Next quote. Everyone, this is Andy Rooney. Anybody familiar with Andy Rooney? Wasn't he on 60 Minutes for a long time? He had his own little bit. Am I correct in saying that? Okay, good. Thank you. Old man in the back says correct. Sorry, Scott. Some of the young ones among us may not even know what 60 Minutes is. It's still on, but Andy Rooney had a little section in every episode of 60 Minutes. Everyone wants to live on the top of the mountain, right? There's something about the view and feeling maybe not so much isolated, but being able to see the vistas and have this exhilaration of being on the mountaintop. But all the happiness, he says, and growth occurs while you're climbing it. Andy Rooney, next slide. Andy Rooney said, next slide. Each peak, this is Sir Martin Convey. Each peak ascended teaches us something. So there's a lot of analogies and metaphors and ways that you can think about what it takes to climb a mountain and then overlay that onto your life. It's difficult to climb a mountain, and through our difficulties, we have opportunities to learn something new. One more. Climb the mountain, not to plant your flag, but to embrace the challenge. Enjoy the air and behold the view at the top. Climb it so you can see the world, not so the world can see you. I thought that was quite profound. Something happens at the top of a mountain or a purposeful, intentional walk at the beach or a retreat where we go to seek the presence of God. But specifically when it comes to the mountaintop, after that mountaintop experience, there is the coming back down. We were designed and created to have contact and intimacy and relationship and amazing moments with God, just us and God, where we get a revelation into a deeper understanding of who He is. But after those experiences and those moments, there is the coming back down. And I contend that those mountaintop experiences are so that we can go back down. Next slide. Then I do have two more quotes. Because I actually came upon two quotes about not just getting to the top, but what happens after. Andy Andrews and the Noticer. Everybody wants to reach the peak, but there is no growth on the top of a mountain. It is in the valley that we slog through the lush grass and rich soil, learning and becoming what enables us to summit life's next peak. And then George Bernard Shaw, the last one. Man can climb to the highest summits, but he cannot dwell there long. We're going to see in our text today that there was somebody who wanted to dwell there long. He wanted to contain this mountaintop experience and not go back down to the slog, to the busyness, to the craziness, to the cursing, and to the unknown and the uncertain, back to the suffering. View at the top and then coming down. Before we get into our text, today is the final Sunday after Epiphany. Epiphany, Diana Butler Bass puts our last few weeks into context as far as Epiphany. And she says, Epiphany is the sacred season in which God's light is revealed in the world. When glory is made manifest, the spiritual flow of these winter seasons are awaiting light in the darkness, Advent, awaiting for that light to come, awaiting light in the darkness, the coming of Jesus, his birth. Light overcoming darkness, the birth itself, Christmas, and following the light to its glorious source, Epiphany. The story moves from flickering candlelight to the light of the cradle, to seekers welcomed into the widening circle of light. But now the mood of the lectionary is changing. Mists are gathering. We're moving toward Lent. And I'll be honest, it's a bit of a heavy season. But this was a heavy season for Jesus, too. The light is still bright and brilliance in the person of Jesus. But after the event we discussed today, he begins his journey. Actually, he's continuing his journey to the cross. He's known all along this journey that he must go on. But in the Gospels, it's not until just before this part of the story that we call the Transfiguration the disciples begin to understand. And Jesus puts his foot on the gas, if you will, points his compass toward Jerusalem, this journey toward the cross. Clouds are gathering. It will be dark. It will be dark. But thank God, only for a moment. The tradition on this fifth Sunday of Epiphany is to remember the Transfiguration, a pivotal occasion in Jesus' life and in his ministry and in the life of the disciples. We're going to see that the disciples continue to struggle about the meaning of Jesus' ministry, why he's really here on earth. And slowly but surely they begin to get it. It does seem, though, that they take 2 steps forward and 1 or 2 or 3 steps back. But they're getting it. They're getting it. We're in the book of Mark. The Transfiguration is also in the book of Matthew in chapter 17. But we're looking at Mark's account, the text in the Revised Common Lectionary today. Mark's brief yet forceful account. In Matthew, it's a little more descriptive, a little bit longer in the narrative. Mark's is brief and to the point. Mark's brief yet forceful account of the transfiguration of Jesus, where his identity is put on full display. Some of you may be ahead of me knowing what the transfiguration story is about. And we'll read that in the text. Jesus' identity is put on full display, shedding light, not just on him, for he is light. His light shines forth, shedding light on our identity in him. Let's go to our text. And so, Matthew, I only have this up once in 3 slides, so I'm going to read all the way through it, and then we're going to switch gears. How do you grind our gears and hit reverse and go back over those 3 slides, and I'll stop every few words or sentence or so and dig a little deeper into the text and see what it says. Mark 9, verses 2 through 9. After 6 days. So what happened the previous 6 days? We'll find out. After 6 days, Jesus took Peter, James, and John, 3 of the disciples, with him and led them up on a high mountain where they were all alone. Then he was transfigured before them. His clothes became dazzling white, whiter than anyone in the world could bleach them. And there appeared before them Elijah, the prophet, and Moses, who were talking with Jesus. I really wish Jesus would have told the disciples what they were talking about so that they could write it down for us. But he didn't. Or if he did tell them, they forgot. Or they didn't put it in. I would imagine if he told them, we would have that today. But it was one of those private conversations, wasn't it? And there appeared before them Elijah and Moses, who were talking with Jesus. Next slide. Peter said to Jesus, "Rabbi, it is good for us to be here." Can you imagine? Your rabbi, your teacher, and then 2 of the greats of the greats. I was going to say in the Bible, but they weren't saying, oh, there's the 2 great guys in the Bible. The stories, the oral tradition of Moses and Elijah, they knew them well. It is good for us to be here. This is awesome. You talk about a mountaintop experience. Let us put up 3 shelters, one for you, one for Moses, and one for Elijah. He really didn't know what to do or what to say. They were so frightened. Then a cloud appeared and covered them, and a voice came from the cloud. This is my son, whom I love. Listen to him. I almost get the picture of if God had fingers, kind of flicking the disciples, Peter, James, on in the head. Listen to him. What might have God wanted them to hear? What had Jesus been saying? What is he going to say that the disciples don't understand, so they need to listen to him? Suddenly, when they looked around, they no longer saw anyone. Elijah, poof. Moses, gone. They no longer saw anyone with them except Jesus. Next slide. As they were coming down the mountain, so they got a view at the top, and now they're coming down. Jesus gave them orders not to tell anyone what they had seen until the Son of Man had risen from the dead. They kept the matter to themselves, discussing what rising from the dead meant. They still couldn't fathom. Jesus couldn't possibly be meaning what he's saying. Because in order to rise, you have to die. And they couldn't have that. They couldn't stand that. Okay, let's go back to the beginning. My clock is running out. Let's go back to the beginning. After 6 days, Jesus took Peter, James, and John with him. Stop. After 6 days, Jesus and his disciples have been together, and Jesus has been ministering. And so instead of just what were they doing these 6 days, because it really doesn't say it. At the end of Mark 8, there's a teaching, and then it says after 6 days. So there's nothing written about these 6 days, but maybe it's not so important what happened as much as it is 6 days. After 6 days. I don't have this on the screen. I need to work a little bit better about putting some of these up, but sometimes I don't know where they're going to go. And anyway, that's enough. I'm delaying the game again. Delay of game. That's the signal for delay of game, by the way. You can throw that at me if you want. You're digressing, Mark. Delay of game. Yellow flag. Exodus 24. We know that Moses had a mountaintop experience, right? He went up to Mount Sinai and received the law, the 10 Commandments, and he spent some time up there, and he saw the glory of God. When Moses went up on the mountain, Exodus 24 and verse 15, the cloud covered it. Wait a second. Didn't we read something about a cloud? The writer and what happened and Mark notating it, it's not lost that this experience is very similar and worded similarly as well. When Moses went up on the mountain, the cloud covered it, and the glory of the Lord settled on Mount Sinai. The glory of the Lord settled on Mount Tabor, the place of the Transfiguration. For 6 days, the cloud covered the mountain. And on the 7th day, the Lord called to Moses from within the cloud. After 6 days, Jesus took Peter, James, and John up the mountain. And we see, yet again, a voice from the cloud. Verse 17 in Exodus 24, to the Israelites, the glory of the Lord looked like a consuming fire, a dazzling, brilliant white light, a light of whiteness. Again, very similar to the text we just read. Looked like a consuming fire on the top of the mountain. Then Moses entered the cloud as he went up the mountain, and he stayed on the mountain 40 days and 40 nights. We don't guess that Jesus stayed with his disciples on the mountain for 40 days and 40 nights. Moses was up there to receive the law. Jesus has fulfilled the law. This is kind of my interpretation. He didn't need to stay up there 40 days and 40 nights. But Peter wanted to. Peter didn't want to come down the mountain. And he led them high up on a mountain where they were all alone. Mountains have a logical religious symbolism for Jewish and Christian cultures, since they are closer to God who dwells in the heavens. Now, I think we all know that just because you're at a higher elevation, you're not geographically or distantly or proximationally, making up words here, you're not really closer to God, but it's that feeling, isn't it? And of course, in the ancient Near East and in lesser scientific minds, you would think, because the belief we're humans, we're here on earth. God is bigger and he is all. He must be up there. So if you go up there, you must be closer to him. And it's not a knock on that thought, that idea. Don't we sometimes take a hike? I'm not telling you to take a hike. We take a hike, or we go up a mountain, whether we're driving or whatever, and we get out and we just see the grandeur, right? The beauty. And it gives you just a sense of awe of God's creation, his creative power. And you feel closer to God, don't you? But the mountains had a religious symbolism of being closer to God. There are a number of places in the Hebrew Bible where prophets and others would go up a mountain and receive a revelation or have a mountaintop experience. As a result of this thought and feeling that you were closer to God, he often revealed himself on a mountaintop in the stories in the Bible. In the Old Testament, the mountains of Sinai and Zion, Mount Zion, where Jerusalem is, are most significant. But there's Mount Hermon and Mount Tabor, Mount Ararat, some think, where Noah's Ark rested, these mountaintop experiences. So the phrase, a mountaintop experience, has come to mean a moment of transcendence or epiphany, and in particular, an experience of significant revelation by God, an epiphany's epiphany. So the phrase mountaintop experience has come to mean a moment of significant revelation given by God, or a time of feeling especially close to God, or perhaps like the disciples, an experience of seeing Jesus as never before. So mountains can be a metaphor for symbolic of God's revelation to man. But God gives the mountaintop experience in order to sustain his people as they go down into the valley. Moses eventually had to go down. God's revelation to us, whether it's at a mountaintop or a beach or a retreat or a quiet place, his revelation is always intended to help us journey with him more closely on the road ahead. There he was, transfigured before them. His clothes became dazzling white, whiter than anyone in the world could bleach them. You ever over bleach something? That thing's white, isn't it? Or spilled bleach on something you didn't want spilled on. You're not going to be able to get the bleach out and make it unwhite. His clothes became dazzling white. This light, this brilliance, this radiance. Transfigured. It's not a word we use very often. It means to transform into something more beautiful or elevated. Some common synonyms of transfigure are convert, metamorphose, transform, transmogrify. Say that with me. Transmogrify. Yes. And transmute. While all these words mean to change a thing into a different thing, transfigure implies a change that exalts or glorifies. Can you imagine the disciples beginning to get in their heads a head of steam that this is the Messiah, and their projected assumption of what they wanted this Messiah to be, somebody who would by force, or maybe some other way, but how else would you overthrow Rome than by force, take back their land, take back their city, to be free from oppression. And this might be the guy to do it. And then Peter, James, and John go up and experience this. Wow. I mean, they had to have sensed the brilliance, the radiance, the power, the light, the glory, the voice, the spectacle, the power. One would think, and maybe the disciples most likely did, that this event guaranteed not only would Jesus not die soon, at least certainly not the way he described, but it's like a superhero, like saying the word and getting all the powers, like Shazam, like Captain Marvel and Shazam, Black Adam, possess the ability to undergo a transformation by uttering the word. Say it with me. Shazam. You don't know Shazam? Shazam! And then they, through this transformation, they gain the powers and attributes of 6 divine entities. Black Adam, Shazam, Captain Marvel. You guys need to brush up on your comic book stuff. This probably to them was Jesus' Shazam moment. But they were disappointed. But as we see, it's not disappointing to us. Because the moment, the powerful moment, is on the cross. On earth. Down in the trenches. Not up some place far away. Notice how Mark describes Jesus' radiant clothes, as no one on earth could bleach them. This glory is not man-made. It's not a man-made one. It's not a parlor trick. It's not an illusion. It does not come by our ways of seeking and maintaining glory for ourselves. As we see Jesus transfigured, we see God's glory, a revelation of who he is. In the Old Testament, glory was presented in terms of both a person and a light, as we see in Ezekiel 1. And these two images are coming together in this narrative of the Transfiguration, here in the person of Jesus. Jesus radiating light reveals to us that our God, his Father, is quite unlike all the other pagan gods who need their worshipers to bring them glory, as if they're lacking in certain ways. The God revealed to us by and in Jesus is self-sufficient and self-sustaining. His life is a life of giving, going out and bringing warmth and life. The God that we see revealed in the transfigured person of Jesus is not a God who is turned inward, not one who needs the praise of humans, but rather a God of love who radiates outward to his creation. God shares his glory with us, freeing us from clamoring to gain our own glory. As I went through this story, and I've given sermons on the Transfiguration before, and if you've ever read a story a lot of different times and try to get something new out of it, I was going to say, if you ever preach on the same thing maybe only a couple of us here have preached on the same thing several times, but I'm like, not what can I find, but God, show me another side to this, another facet. And I had come to think that this was no transfiguration of Jesus at all. Because he wasn't becoming something that he wasn't before. It's more of a revelation of who he really is. It was more of a transformation for the disciples or of the disciples. Verse 4. And there appeared before them Elijah and Moses, who were talking with Jesus. Elijah and Moses. Probably in a nutshell, why these two? They represented the law and the prophets. The law being given to Moses, the law and the covenant, absolutely imperative and important to the nation of Israel, the way that they were to interact with God and be with one another, the law and the covenant, and then, of course, the prophets, who were there to continually guide the people back into relationship with God, and, of course, also to point forward to Jesus himself. These two very important categories, the law and the prophets, represented here by Moses and Elijah. And of course, we see in the text in the Gospels that Jesus has come to fulfill the law and the prophets. So these are the forerunners of Jesus. And it's very significant. It's interesting in Malachi 4, verses 4 through 6, a minor prophet book in the Hebrew Scriptures, Malachi 4, verses 4 through 6, mentions both Moses and Elijah. It says, "Surely the day is coming," in verse 4 of Malachi 4, "it will burn like a furnace." Verse 2, "But for you who revere my name, the Son of Righteousness will rise with healing in its rays." Almost like a little vignette or foretelling of this transfiguration. The Son of Righteousness will rise with healing in its rays, this brilliant, radiant light, and you will go out and frolic like well-fed calves. Have you ever frolicked? I think I asked that. Did I ask that last week? Or the week before? Have you ever frolicked like a well-fed calf? "Then you will trample on the wicked, and they will be ashes under the soles of your feet on the day when I act, says the Lord Almighty. Remember the law," it says in verse 4. Did I say verse 4? "Remember the law of my servant Moses, the decrees and laws I gave him at Horeb for all Israel. See, I will send you the prophet Elijah." And so the disciples are familiar with these scrolls, these stories, and could very well be familiar with Malachi, and it's talking about the righteous will rise, and the Lord is returning. "If you remember the law of my servant Moses, and I will send the prophet Elijah to you before that great and dreadful day of the Lord comes. He will turn the hearts of the parents to their children and the hearts of the children to their parents, or else I will come and strike the land with total destruction." These two names in Malachi mentioned together, talking about the coming of God back to earth. And they're there together on the mountain. It's interesting in Deuteronomy 18 verse 15, it says, "The Lord your God will raise up for you a prophet like me from among you, from your fellow Israelites." He's referring to Moses. Moses was considered a prophet as well. "The Lord your God will raise up for you a prophet, Moses, like me from among you, from your fellow Israelites. You must listen to him." Fascinating to me. That speaking of Moses, you must listen to him. God wanted the Israelites to listen to Moses. And now this is being spoken of about Jesus. Listen to him. Their presence with Jesus on the high mountain rouses Jewish hopes about the final redemption of Israel and suggests or makes them think that the time has been fulfilled, that the kingdom is drawing near. The brilliance, the radiance, the presence of Moses and Elijah, it's all coming together. Verse 5, Peter said to Jesus, "Rabbi, it is good for us to be here. Let us put up 3 shelters, one for you, one for Moses, and one for Elijah." He didn't know what else to say. They were so frightened. I remember reading this a long, long while back and just finding out, it's quite perplexing. Why would Peter want to put up shelters or tents, most likely, is what he's referring to, shelters. One can only guess what Peter intended. Are the shelters meant to recall the Exodus and an exclusive reference to the Feast of Tabernacles? Because, of course, the Israelites in the Exodus had to continually erect and take down and erect and take down tents and temporary dwellings as they moved through the wilderness. There's also an ancient battle cry in 2 Samuel 21 and 1 Kings 12:16 and 2 Chronicles 10:16, a battle cry, an ancient battle cry that says, "Every man to his tent, O Israel," in anticipation of a military uprising. Was he basically saying, here is your tent, let's get ready for battle? Because this is it, look at all this power, this might, Moses, Elijah, this is our day, this is our hour, this is our time. This is Jesus' time to go back down the mountain and take care of his business. Does Peter want to set up the messianic headquarters right here on this mountain? Maybe he only wants to prolong the blessed mountaintop moment and offers the 3 figures hospitality, since tents are regarded as the habitations of divine beings. What was Peter thinking? Maybe he just wanted to contain it, control it in a way, package it. For him to say that or to want to do that it's honorable, it's reverent, it's respectable. But this isn't what Jesus had in mind, to stay up there. They needed to come down. Peter wanted to keep it up there. If we make you shelters, we don't have to go anywhere. We can just enjoy this forever, or at least stay here long enough to make our battle plan for when we go back down. Verse 7, then a cloud appeared and covered them, and a voice from the cloud said, "This is my son whom I love. Listen to him." Very reminiscent of Jesus' baptism, isn't it? This is my son in whom I am well pleased. This is my son whom I love. Listen to him. Listen to him. Remember Deuteronomy 18:15, the same was said about Moses. You must listen to him. This voice, this proclamation was identifying Jesus for who he really was, the Son of God. This is my son, whom I love. We use the word transfiguration, but he wasn't changed. He was fully revealed for who he was, for who he is. The transfiguration not only supports the identity of Jesus as the Son of God, as it does in his baptism, but the statement, listen to him, identifies him as the messenger and mouthpiece of God. You know how Moses was the one, my chosen person to lead my people? Jesus is my messenger, my mouthpiece. When named for what it is, this transfiguration, actually a proclamation of the beloved one, revealing this true identity of who Jesus is, who he has always been, but revealed to the disciples. The disciples are caught up into the divine presence, the mystery behind the veil of fog, if you will. They're shown behind the curtain who Jesus really is. I think this was less a transfiguration of Jesus and more as a transfiguration for Peter, James, and John. Because Jesus did not undergo some change on the mountain. The disciples, Peter, James, and John, saw him for who he really was. The radiant Jesus on the top of the mountain is the same Jesus who came from the foot of the mountain. The only thing that has changed is the disciples were able to get a glimpse of who Jesus really is. Jesus' transfiguration is not a change in Jesus. It's a change in our seeing and knowing of who he is. Peter needed to see this in order to relax his grip on trying to attain his own glory. If you know anything about Peter, he was one of the disciples who were always metaphorically arm wrestling with the other disciples about who was the greatest. He and the other disciples are being prepared to understand that the Messiah's glory does not exclude the cross. The cross was the most brutal act of exclusion that brought all the shame that we so desperately try to avoid, but Jesus will not avoid that. He will not avoid the cross. He goes there to include us in his life with his Father. And Jesus, in his full identity, our identity is forever significant and secure. Suddenly, in verse 8, when they looked around, they no longer saw anyone with them except Jesus. Moses and Elijah are gone. The past is gone. Brought into, fulfilled, and culminated in Jesus. The cloud disperses and Moses and Elijah are gone. They no longer see anyone with them except Jesus. What was that conversation? Moses, pat, 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 pat. Excellent job. Elijah, pat, pat. Way to go. I'll take it from here. It's not that they're no longer important, no longer significant. It's just all they represent is all brought into and fulfilled in Jesus. When they looked around, they no longer saw anyone there except Jesus. Okay, we're at halftime. Everybody take a stretch. And let's get ready for the second half. Second half. Cheerleader. No, just a couple more verses and thoughts. Next slide. Last slide. Last few. Well, we have the may we slide, but this is as they were coming down the mountain. coming down the mountain, a view at the top, and then the coming down. Jesus gave them orders not to tell anyone what they had seen until the Son of Man had risen from the dead. Our text for the day ends here, but the next few verses, they're scratching their heads. What does he mean? What does he mean? They kept the matter to themselves, discussing. See, I added verse 10. It was only supposed to go to verse 9, I think. I added verse 10. They kept the matter to themselves, discussing what was rising from the dead meant. They still couldn't get it. Jesus, shortly before the Transfiguration, he begins to talk about his suffering. It says this in Mark 8, verse 31. He then began to teach them, this is before the Transfiguration, just before after 6 days, he then began to teach them that the Son of Man must suffer many things and be rejected by the elders, the chief priests, and the teachers of the law, that he must be killed and after 3 days rise again. He spoke plainly about this. And Peter took him aside and began to rebuke him. Jesus, you really don't know what you're saying. You can't possibly mean what you're saying. But he did mean it. Not only is he beginning this teaching about his own suffering, that his service to humanity will lead to this suffering, he also begins to talk about his disciples' service to humanity, including quite possibly suffering as well. He says this in Mark 8:34, just a couple verses after 8:31, where he's talking about his own journey to the cross and being crucified. Mark 8:34, then he called the crowd to him along with his disciples and said, whoever wants to be my disciple must deny themselves and take up their cross and follow me. So the cross of Jesus for them in this story is in the future. And they're denying it, right? They can't accept that. So I know when we hear the word take up your cross and follow me, we have a different angle, a different perspective on it. So what were the disciples thinking? Those who heard this, take up our cross? Was the cross as an execution and punishment implement familiar to them? What would they have thought? For whoever wants to save their life will lose it, but whoever loses their life for me and for the gospel will save it. The cross, which was used in a crucifixion, was a method of capital punishment, particularly among the Persians, the Seleucids, the Carthaginians, and the Romans from about the 6th century BCE, right, before the common era, right, before BC, before Christ. So several hundred years before Jesus came on the scene, crucifixions happened, and they typically happened on what we would call a cross. From the 6th century BCE to the 4th century CE, Constantine the Great, the first Christian emperor, abolished it in the Roman Empire in the early 4th century out of veneration for Jesus Christ, the most famous victim of crucifixion. Crucifixion was most frequently used to punish political or religious agitators, pirates, slaves, or those who had no civil rights. In 519 BCE, so 500 years before Jesus, Darius I, king of Persia, crucified 3,000 political opponents in Babylon. In 88 BC, Alexander Jannaeus, the Judean king and high priest, crucified 800 Pharisaic opponents. And at about 32 AD or CE, in the Common Era, Pontius Pilate had Jesus of Nazareth put to death by crucifixion. And it was typical that a tall stake was put in the ground wherever the crucifixion was to take place, and the convicted, the criminal, the agitator, the one who was going to be killed on this stake would have a crossbeam put on their shoulders, and they would carry that to the stake, and then they would be put up on the stake. So this image, this scene of a cross, would have been known to the disciples. Not a very good marketing ploy or advertising scheme. Come join me, but you must carry your cross. For whoever wants to save their life will lose it, but whoever loses their life for me and for the gospel will save it. This is what Jesus was getting at when he was talking about what his ministry will involve, what his future will be involved in, and what it means to follow him. Soon after they came down the mountain, Jesus picks up where he left off. Mark 9, verse 30. They left that place at Mount Tabor and passed through Galilee. And Jesus did not want anyone to know where they were because he was teaching his disciples. And he said to them, "The Son of Man is going to be delivered into the hands of men. They will kill him, and after 3 days he will rise." But they did not understand what he meant, and they were afraid to ask him about it. We don't seek suffering for suffering's sake. We seek service. We're called to serve. Jesus came to serve. Of course, in the way that he served as the Son of God, he went through suffering. And we too, as we serve the world, as we minister with Jesus, where he's ministering, as we follow Father, Son, and Spirit, there will be suffering. The Transfiguration. The disciples getting a glimpse of who Jesus really is. And with all that power and all that glory and all that radiance with Moses and Elijah, Jesus still came down the mountain. He had to come down the mountain. He wanted to. He had to complete what he came on earth to do. And we see even with this transfiguration, and I have said that it was the disciples who maybe were more transfigured than Jesus, but they did not understand still. We are to seek mountaintop experiences. But we can't stay on the mountaintop. We must take the experiences with us. I think God gives us those miraculous moments, not just for the moment itself. Of course, those times cannot be discounted or trivialized or overanalyzed. They are gifts. When we come to a deeper understanding of who God is, God revealing himself more clearly to us, showing himself for who he is for us, and thus a deeper revelation about who we are to him. That's a transfiguration of us. The light of revelation, though still mysterious to us and perhaps still shrouded and veiled in a cloud of uncertainty and unknowing, this light of revelation, this is the place where faith plays its role. Because even if we have what we may say is a mountaintop experience, we may not understand it all. In this moment of a revelation, a view, a glimpse of God, there is still mystery. to us, and perhaps it's still shrouded and veiled in a cloud of uncertainty and unknowing. This light of revelation helps us see ourselves for who we are and who we are to Him and in Him. This is transfiguration. We are not ourselves, our true selves, apart from Him. We are not ourselves, our true selves, apart from Him. Can we even really exist apart from Him? These mountaintop experiences, these views from the top, they give us clarity of purpose, insight to the divine, and rekindles the divine spark within us. Though we may not be able to vocalize or comprehend the full meaning, it nonetheless imbues our life with meaning, motivation, and movement. And so we move from the spot. We move from the moment and come down the mountain. The experience, the gift is so we can come down again from the mountain to the valley, from the beach back to the suburbs, from the desert returning to the city, from the still, quiet prayer closets to the busy, bustling kitchens and the yammering, rowdy living rooms, from the silent retreats or sabbaticals back to the office, the break rooms, and the cubicles, from the commune back to the community. Yes, we are to seek and desire the mountaintops. They fuel us and make us feel whole again. They put us back together, at least maybe just one piece at a time. We need them, but we can't manufacture them. We can't muscle them, and we can't manipulate them. We can sometimes find ourselves so frantically and frenetically searching and looking for the next view at the top that we miss and don't see what God has for us down here. In this sacred moment of transfiguration, let us bow our heads and open our hearts to the profound mystery unfolding before us. Beloved, as we gaze upon the radiant light of this transfigured moment, may we be reminded that the divine spark resides within each of us, waiting to be unveiled. Just as the veil between the seen and the unseen is lifted, may our own veils of perception and understanding be removed, allowing us to receive and see the interconnectedness of all creation. In this transfigured light, we are called to recognize the divine in every face, in every creature, and in the beauty of the world around us. We are co-creators in this ongoing cosmic dance of creation, evolving toward the fullness of love. So, with hearts aglow and spirits uplifted, may we carry this transfigured light out into the world, refracting it with all we meet. May we, like Moses and Elijah, be bearers of wisdom and compassion, and may our lives reflect the love that transfigures all things. As we descend from this sacred mountain, let us do so with grace and purpose, knowing that we are forever changed by this encounter with the divine, whether it be on a mountaintop, a beach, a quiet place. May the blessings of transfiguration be upon us all now and forever. May we see the sacred moment of transfiguration, to see Jesus as he really is, so that we may see ourselves for who we truly are. May we see the view at the top and listen, and then come down again so that we may carry the transfigured light out into the world, refracting it with all